there is an escalating fight between 7 premiers and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau over that federal carbon tax. Those premiers calling for Trudeau to halt the upcoming increase on April 1st, but the federal government is pushing back, saying 80% of households get more money back in rebates than they pay in carbon taxes directly. Jonathan Wilkinson is the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, and I spoke with him earlier today from Germany. Minister Wilkinson, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You have, in some ways, these dual and dueling crises, and that is affordability and climate. And some people see them as one or the other, including 7 premiers who've now said they're opposed to the carbon tax hike on April 1st. In the face of that, how do you navigate going forward when so many leaders in the country are saying now is not the time to increase costs?
I guess I would say a couple things. I mean, firstly, they're both important issues. Obviously, affordability is critically important for people, particularly those who live on more modest incomes. But climate change is an existential threat to the future of the human race. It's not going away. And the longer we take to actually take action, the more dire the situation becomes for our children and our grandchildren. So you have to try to do both. You have to be smart about climate policy and do it in a way that actually addresses concerns around affordability. And I'm certainly happy to talk to any one of the premiers about the issues relating to affordability. But based on the facts, the 7 premiers are just wrong. At the end of the day, 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back from the rebate than they pay in the price. It works directly inverse to income, so it's those that are most vulnerable that actually get more money back. And the folks that actually pay more than they get back in a rebate are people who live in 6,000 square foot homes, drive a Hummer, and have a boat in their backyard. And you know what? They should pay more because they pollute more.
Premier Moe in Saskatchewan has decided, of course, not to implement the carbon tax, not collecting the money. And as a result, you said no rebates going to go to the people of Saskatchewan. They're going to lose out on that money. What happens next for that province, which is essentially breaking your law?
Well, I think I've been pretty clear in comments that I've made. I mean, look, I grew up in Saskatchewan. I went to university in Saskatchewan. I worked for a former premier of Saskatchewan. My family lives in Saskatchewan. I know the province very well. I think it's enormously disappointing that an elected premier would knowingly break a law. I don't know how he expects that folks that live within his provincial boundaries will have respect for the laws that he passes through the legislature, given what he has done. So clearly, there have to be consequences. There's no way that you can simply allow people to willfully break the law, whatever laws they choose, and there are no consequences. Certainly, part of that, unfortunately, is going to be a reduction likely in the rebate because the amount of money that's actually getting paid is less. And that will unfortunately hurt more vulnerable people. I mean, Scott Moe is making poor people poorer. But in terms of consequences for the government, that is something that is actively under discussion at the federal level, and we will have more to say in the coming weeks.
Now, last week you said something similar. What's your timeline for actually having the consequences part of this?
I think it's important that we get this right, that we are thoughtful about how we actually address this. I think Canadians would expect us to make sure that we are doing this in a thoughtful way. Canadians also expect, though, that their elected leaders abide by the law. I mean, one of the most fundamental parts of our Constitution is peace, order, and good government. That is the ethos of being Canadian. And what Scott Moe is doing is telling people it's okay to break the law, and that's just not on.
Next door in Alberta, the Premier has sort of taken a step back on renewables. How worried are you that that could impact Canada's energy future?
Well, look, Alberta was by far the jurisdiction that had the fastest growth in renewable technology over the past number of years. It has benefited to the tune of many, many billions of dollars in investment. I think that the recent moves by the government of Alberta, which will slow down at a minimum the growth of renewables, is unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate for Albertans. I think the Pembina Institute indicated that just based on the most recent rules, that there are 57 projects that will be impacted, and it's about $14 billion in investment. So I think it's very unfortunate. I think it's very short-sighted. But at the end of the day, we need to find pathways through which we get to a clean grid that is reliable and affordable. And we will continue to work with Alberta to ensure that that's the case through the working group that we established with them probably almost a year ago.
Back to the carbon tax for a moment, Minister. I wonder, You have 7 premiers who are saying now's not the time to increase. You've got an opposition leader who's saying cut the carbon tax altogether, and he stands very well in the polls. We're an election to be held today. How is it that your government lost the narrative on the carbon tax?
Well, I don't think we've lost the narrative on the carbon tax. And I think if you look at the polls, people are still pretty evenly split. I think we do need to do a better job of communicating the affordability dimensions of the price on pollution. Because it is something that actually makes life more affordable. Mr. Poilievre can say all he wants, but he has zero facts to back him up. You go talk to Trevor Toombs at the University of Calgary or Brent Dolter at the University of Regina or just about any other academic who's done work on this. The facts are clearly that people get more money back. And Mr. Poilievre should stop lying to Canadians. He is telling lies on an ongoing basis. And that's just not something that a responsible leader should be doing.
Ontario's Premier Doug Ford looks at this through the political dimension and says your government is going to get annihilated next year at the polls if it goes ahead with an increase right now. This is from somebody who is fairly well known to pore over political opinion polls on the regular. Is that a concern for your government, that an increase would significantly impact your chances in the next election?
An increase in the price on pollution means an increase in the rebate, which actually means that it will become more affordable for Canadians who actually are living on more modest incomes. I do think that there is a communication issue. We need to be better at communicating the affordability portions of this. But at the end of the day, like, Canadians, I think, when faced with a choice, are going to be thinking about the next government being one that actually, yes, is focused on ensuring affordability, is focused on growing an economy, but is also focused on the future for our kids and ensuring that we actually are addressing climate change. Mr. Poilievre's plan in terms of climate is to let the planet burn, to essentially allow our children to inherit a situation that may be almost irrecoverable. And that is just not responsible leadership.
Do you think you would be in this position right now had your government not gone ahead with the temporary suspension of the carbon tax on home heating oil in Atlantic Canada?
Well, again, it may be that we need to communicate a bit more effectively, but I think the home heating oil, and it's not an exemption, it's a pause, is something that was a very specific issue, right? I mean, home heating oil, let's be clear, is 3 or 4 times as expensive as natural gas. It has accelerated in terms of its cost very significantly over the last couple of years. And in the context of reasonably high inflation and high interest rates, it was really squeezing those people who are actually living in poverty. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we said we are going to move forward with a program to put in place heat pumps that will allow them to save a couple $1,000s a year on a go-forward basis, and there would be a pause while we actually put those into place. It is very different from natural gas. I mean, people who say that somehow this is equivalent to natural gas do not understand the overall economics. It is 3 to 4 times as expensive. Most people who actually have heating oil in their homes are living in energy poverty. So it was an affordability issue, a very significant one that we are addressing.
Minister Wilkinson, thanks very much for your time today.
Not at all. Thank you.